clean exchange of suffering for suffering, justice delivered through pain. But in I Saw the Devil, revenge is anything but linear. It unfolds instead as a psychological spiral, an ever-tightening loop in which the Avenger becomes bound to the very darkness he seeks to extinguish. Director Kim Ji-woon constructs a narrative in which the pursuit of retribution is not simply a reaction to trauma, but an existential transformation, one that progressively erodes the Avenger's identity until only the trauma itself remains. The tragedy of the film is not merely that violence begets violence. It is that the act of revenge consumes the Avenger from within, reshaping him into a reflection of the monster he hunts. Getplex. At the center of this psychological unraveling is Soo Hyun, an elite operative whose fiancé is brutally murdered by the serial killer Kyung Chul. His grief does not manifest as a paralysis or withdrawal, but as hyper-functioning obsession. Rather than allowing himself to mourn, he violently displaces his psychological pain outward, weaponizing his training as a means to exert omnipotent control in a world that suddenly feels meaningless. This is the first sign of a tragic psychological shift, the refusal to process vulnerability. Psychologically, grief requires acknowledgement of helplessness, of what cannot be undone. Revenge, however, promises the opposite, an intoxicating fantasy of total agency. Soo Hyun clings to this fantasy because the alternative, confronting the void left by his loved one, feels unbearable. Thus, his revenge becomes ritualistic. He refuses to kill Kyung Chul outright, choosing instead to torture, release, and recapture him again and again. This cyclical violence mirrors the obsessive repetition often observed in trauma responses. A person compulsively reenacts aspects of their trauma in an attempt to gain mastery over it. The tragedy is that repetition does not provide mastery. It only deepens the psychological wound. Soo Hyun's actions cease to be about punishing Kyung Chul, and instead become about sustaining the illusion that he is still in control. Revenge morphs into self-preservation. Cruelty becomes an emotional crutch. Kyung Chul, for his part, becomes a grotesque mirror held up to Soo Hyun's psyche. He embodies the chaotic, uncontrollable violence that shattered Soo Hyun's life. And by refusing to die, he forces Soo Hyun to confront the horror of what he himself is becoming. From a psychological perspective, Kyung Chul represents the shadow archetype, those repressed impulses and capacities for cruelty that lie buried within the self. The longer the pursuit continues, the thinner the boundary becomes between hunter and hunted, order and chaos, justice and savagery. The film's violence is so unflinching, not purely for shock value, but because it visually depicts the erosion of that boundary. Each act of brutality dulls Soo Hyun's sense of empathy, numbing him to the emotional cost of what he is doing. His humanity decays not suddenly, but incrementally, one choice at a time. The tragedy crystallizes in the film's final stretch. Although Soo Hyun finally orchestrates a scenario in which Kyung Chul experiences terror and helplessness, comparable to what he inflicted on others, the act brings no catharsis. Instead, Soo-hyun collapses in tears, not from remorse, but from the crushing realization that he has severed his last connection to who he once was. He has become spiritually unrecognizable to himself and to the memory of the woman he loved. The monster may be dead, yet the nightmare remains alive within him. This emotional collapse is the psychological apex of the film. The moment he confronts the truth that revenge is not a doorway back to equilibrium, but a one-way passage deeper into the darkness. What makes I Saw the Devil so devastating to watch is that it refuses to allow revenge any moral victory. The film is not content with merely condemning violence. It reveals the psychological machinery that makes revenge feel necessary, seductive, even righteous at times, before dismantling that illusion completely. It argues that revenge is tragic not because it fails to punish evil, but because it demands the sacrifice of one's own moral and emotional integrity. Soo-hyun begins as a man defined by love and purpose. By the end, he is defined only by the void that vengeance carved into him. The final image of Soo-hyun walking away, haunted and hollow, is the film's ultimate psychological thesis. Some roads, once taken, reshape the traveler, so completely that turning back becomes impossible. Revenge is not a path of justice, but a metamorphosis, a tragic becoming. And in I Saw the Devil, the true horror is not what one man does to another, but what the pursuit of retribution does to the soul of the man pursuing it. Well, friends, that's gonna be all for now. If you are interested in this film, I urge you to check it out for yourself and formulate your own thoughts and opinions about it. If you like this video, I urge you to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you aren't already. If you'd like to go the extra mile and support the channel even more, you can help support the channel on Ko-Fi, where you can drop a single tip, the cost of a cup of coffee, or less. No pressure, no tears required. We also have a Mercari store where you can go and get yourself a little piece of the ETF archive. While collecting VHS, Blu-rays, and DVDs over many years, we wind up with lots of duplicates, and we unfortunately can't store them all. So on our Mercari shop, we have all of those for sale. Purchasing those not only expands your collection, but makes room for us to expand ours. All the links for everything are down in the description. Until next time, stay safe, and as always, thanks for watching.